A brief note before the drive begins. This is the first time an OLED drive video has included narration. The voice is synthetic. It has no driver's license, no sense of direction, and no legal responsibility for missed turns. That last part matters more than it should. For most of this channel's life, the arrangement has been simple. The camera watches, the car moves, and nobody explains anything. Today we are making one exception. A mechanical narrator will join for part of the route, offer a little context, acknowledge the occasional driving decision, and then return the video to its natural habitat: road noise and forward motion. The cameraman, meanwhile, is already having trouble avoiding old habits. He changes lanes and stops traffic. He accelerates toward a light that is turning yellow. He seems to be negotiating with the road in a language known mostly to North Shore drivers. Maybe he is trying to blend in. Maybe he is seeking the private thrill of a four-wheeled camera that stays almost flat in the corners, while he refuses to lift his foot from the throttle. Either way, this is not a tutorial.
Today, we're leaving Blainville on Boulevard de la Seigneurie. The drive starts in a pretty ordinary way on a North Shore suburban boulevard that a lot of people probably cross without paying much attention to it. But from here, the route is going to slowly turn into a full descent toward Montreal. This drive was planned to avoid the highways, so instead of taking the fast and direct option, we're taking the longer way down through the boulevards. It is less efficient, but much better to watch. You get more of the intersections, more of the changing rhythm, and more of that slightly nervous local driving where people handle the lanes like visitors should almost apologize for using their road. On paper, the route is simple enough. We leave Blainville, connect with Chemin de la Côte Saint-Louis, then Route 335 before heading down toward Laval on Ile Jésus. But of course, a simple route on paper does not always stay simple once the camera is rolling. Between the end of Boulevard de la Seigneurie and the beginning of Boulevard Industriel, the OLED drive camera car misses the left turn. Nothing serious, but it does force a small U-turn to recover the route. That is exactly the kind of thing that happens when you are driving through an area you do not really know, with the route only half memorized and the camera already running. We kept that moment in the video because it belongs to the actual drive. After that correction, we get back on track toward Boulevard Industriel, then continue toward Chemin de la Côte Saint-Louis. The scenery still feels very North Shore suburban, but the name of the road points to something older. These old coat roads often keep traces of earlier routes through the territory, even when the area around them has been taken over by newer residential streets, commercial strips, and larger roads. At this point, we are not in Montreal yet, but the drive is no longer just local either. The route is starting to lean south toward Laval and eventually toward the island of Montreal. For now, the video is still taking its time, but the descent toward the city has already started. From here, the drive settles into Chemin de la Côte Saint-Louis. This is not the postcard version of the North Shore. It is more useful than beautiful. Houses set back from the road, small commercial buildings, side streets, and that slightly patched together feeling you get in places that have been growing for a long time without ever fully starting over. The road name sounds older than what we see around it. That happens a lot around Montreal. The names remember one version of the place, while the traffic is already living in another one. The camera car is now back on course after the missed turn, but the drive still has that careful rhythm of someone reading the road in real time. Not lost exactly, more like cautiously pretending not to be lost. There is a difference. On a highway, this part of the trip would simply disappear. You would already be somewhere else. Here, because we are staying on the surface roads, every intersection has to be dealt with. Every turn lane matters. Every local driver seems to know something the visitor does not. That is part of the appeal of avoiding the autoroutes. You lose the clean, fast version of the route, but you gain the small frictions, the lane choices, the awkward merges, the commercial entrances, the drivers who commit to a move slightly earlier than seems necessary. At this point, the drive is still mostly calm. We are not yet in the tighter traffic of Laval, and we are definitely not in Montreal. But the road is beginning to feel less like a local Blainville drive and more like the beginning of a longer descent. The next objective is Route 335. It is one of those connecting roads that does not need to look dramatic to matter. It simply pulls the trip south, away from the local streets and toward the larger pattern of traffic leading to Jésus. The visual change is gradual. Nothing announces itself too loudly, but the spacing starts to shift. The road feels a bit more directed. The choices ahead matter more. We are leaving the first part of the drive behind and moving into the section where the North Shore starts feeding traffic toward Laval. For now, though, the camera just stays with the road. We notice more crests and outlooks as we descend from the Laurentian Plateau. As we cross onto Jésus, the route starts to feel more serious. We are now at Laval, and almost immediately, Boulevard des Laurentides appears at the intersection. We are not turning there yet, but it is already waiting for us. Later, it will become the main line of the drive south toward Montreal. For now, we stay with Route 335, which here is also called Avenue Papineau. This stretch is under construction, and the road has that temporary logic that only roadwork can create. The final version seems to be aiming for a wider 6-lane setup, with a reserved lane built into the plan. At the moment, though, not everything is finished. The right lane is still being worked on, so traffic is shifted into the reserved lane on the other side of the setup. We are basically using a lane that feels like it belongs to the opposite direction, which is always a pleasant reminder that orange cones are now in charge of the itinerary. It works, but it asks for attention. The road markings, the barriers, the unfinished pavement, and the temporary lane choices all make the drive feel a little less automatic. This is also where the surface road choice starts to pay off visually. On the highway, construction usually becomes a blur of barrels and brake lights. Here, we get to see the street being rebuilt in pieces. The future road is visible before it is fully open. There is something slightly strange about driving through a road that is still becoming itself. The lanes are there, but not quite. The reserved lane is there, but not quite in its final role. The boulevard is open, but only under supervision. And in the middle of it, the OLED drive camera car does what it usually does. Keeps moving, follows the cones, tries not to invent its own traffic law, and lets the work zone explain itself on screen. We now turn onto Boulevard Saint-Martin. The change is immediate. The road opens into a much wider boulevard, 3 lanes in each direction, and the built environment starts to feel more urban almost right away. The 10-story buildings appear, the spacing gets tighter, and the road begins to roll across the terrain instead of simply cutting through it. This is still Laval, but it no longer has the same edge of the North Shore feeling as the earlier part of the drive. The scale has changed. The boulevard is wider, traffic has more weight, and the camera car is now moving through a part of the city that feels more connected to the larger pull of Montreal. Then, because this is an OLED drive video and not a laboratory experiment, the route pauses at a garden center. The stop is brief. The camera does not really follow the visit inside. The drive simply pauses here because the cameraman has been checking garden centers after a late start to the season. A few minutes later, he is back on the road. Instead of returning to the main route in a perfectly clean line, the camera car works its way through nearby residential streets. The pace drops, the road narrows, and the view shifts away from the heavy boulevard environment for a moment. This is one of the advantages of a route like this. The detours are not always interruptions. Sometimes they show the seams between the big roads and the neighborhoods behind them. The objective now is to reconnect with Boulevard des Laurentides. That boulevard will take over the drive south and bring us closer to Montreal Island. At this point, every turn is moving us deeper into the metropolitan area, even when the camera is only passing through quiet residential streets to recover the main line.
As we get closer to Montreal, something appears on the horizon. It is the main tower of the University of Montreal's Pavillon Roger Gaudry, visible from far away because of its 22-story vertical profile. From this distance, it has that strange civic monument feeling. Part university building, part hilltop landmark, part object you notice before you fully understand what you are looking at. The tower was designed by Ernest Cormillet, and visually it has often been compared to the Nebraska state capitol. Not because they are the same building, obviously, but because both have that tall, stepped, monumental silhouette that does not look like a normal campus building. At this point, we are only a few meters away from entering Montreal on Rue Berri. The road changes again, trees get taller, the buildings come closer, and the view starts to feel more like an older residential part of the city. Red brick two-story apartment buildings appear along the street, mixed here and there with post-war single-family homes. This is one of those small but clear changes in the drive. Laval is behind us, Montreal is about to begin, and the route is no longer just approaching the island. It is entering the older street pattern of the city itself.
Ahead on the horizon, one high-rise starts to stand out. After all the lower buildings and long surface roads, it does not take much. Anything above 15 stories suddenly feels like a warning from the city. The quiet part is ending. The building belongs to the Fédération des Travailleurs du Québec, the FTQ. It sits there like a marker at the edge of the next section of the drive. Not downtown, not yet, but no longer the looser suburban approach either. As we pass it, Rue Saint-Denis begins. Almost immediately, we go under the Trans-Canada Highway, which is one of the more efficient ways a city can remind you that there are several Montréal realities stacked on top of each other. One is moving quickly overhead. Ours is waiting at street level, behind a windshield, with no special privileges. We are passing Ahuntsic and entering Villeray. The buildings get taller, the street gets tighter, the brick comes closer. Balconies start doing more of the work. The city is not announcing itself with a grand entrance. It is just quietly removing the extra space. From here, the drive is moving into older Montreal. Denser, more settled, and visibly more expensive in the Montreal way, not through giant houses, but through location, trees, older buildings, and the privilege of already being inside the city. Continuing south, we start moving toward the edge of the Plateau Mont-Royal. Before we get there, Rue Saint-Denis carries us through Rosemont and La Petite-Patrie, close to Little Italy. This is where the drive starts to pick up another Montreal habit. Food starts appearing as geography. Around Rue Saint-Talon and Rue Bay-Lanzier, the street sits close to several different food worlds at once. There are Vietnamese businesses in the area, Latino shops and restaurants nearby, and just a few blocks west, around Rue Saint-Laurent, the old Italian cafes, markets and grocery stores of Little Italy. Jean-Talon Market is also close by, which means we are now driving through one of the parts of Montreal where a person can pretend they are just going out for one thing and come back with coffee, basil, mangoes, bread, hot sauce, and no clear explanation. The clues are already there. Smaller storefronts, older buildings, signs changing from block to block, and that specific Montreal density where the best meal nearby is usually not the most visible one. This section is still Rue Saint-Denis, but it feels less like a simple north-south route now. It is starting to pass through neighborhoods with their own gravity. To the west, Little Italy and Rue Saint-Laurent. Nearby, Jean Talon Market. Around us, Rosemont and La Petite-Patrie. Ahead, the Plateau is getting closer. The camera car keeps going south, surrounded by the kind of Montreal where the city's map is partly drawn by what people eat. After passing under Rue des Carrières, Rue Saint-Denis keeps carrying us through one of the city's better eating zones. This part of Montreal is dense with restaurants, cafes, small grocers, bakeries, specialty shops, and the kind of places people recommend with slightly too much confidence. The street itself is doing normal street things: traffic lights, parked cars, deliveries, people crossing at their own chosen interpretation of the signal. But around it, the neighborhood is full of reasons to stop. We do not stop, which is either discipline or poor planning. Soon we will turn onto Rue Chemin. Chemin has a different tone almost immediately. The street feels more serious, partly because of the taller stone-faced buildings, and partly because it starts to look like people here have meetings, inherit furniture, and know exactly which tree belongs to the city and which one belongs to the building. Near the corner of Avenue du Parc La Fontaine, there is a single, older, ancestral-looking building on the right. It stands out because the rest of the street has moved on around it. A long time ago, this area had a much more agricultural setting. That version is gone now. Completely gone. Whatever fields were here have been replaced by stone, brick, trees, apartments, institutions, and Montreal density doing what it does best, making the past visible only in fragments, usually when you are already driving past it. After Chemin, we turn onto Sherbrooke East. The street widens, the pace slows, and we begin working our way toward Rue Papineau. At this point, the drive has come a long way from Blainville. The early suburban boulevards are behind us. So are Laval, the construction lanes, the garden centre stop, and the careful route corrections made by a camera car that occasionally behaves like it has a meeting with destiny and no confirmed address. Here, we are fully inside Montreal. The intersections are busier, the buildings sit closer to the street, and every red light seems to collect its own small committee of cars, buses, bikes, pedestrians, and people making decisions that may or may not have been approved by the traffic code. As we approach Papineau, traffic gets heavier. A section of bumper-to-bumper driving has been cut in the edit, out of basic concern for OLED drive viewers. There is immersion, and then there is watching the same brake light achieve personal growth. So we keep the route moving. From Papineau, the drive begins lining up with the Jacques-Cartier bridge, one of the classic ways out of the city. The video will end on the bridge, looking toward the opposite shore from the one we crossed earlier. If you are still here after the whole drive, thank you for making the trip with us. You have survived Blainville, Laval, orange cones, missed turns, long boulevards, local lane negotiations, and the first synthetic voice ever allowed to speak on the OLED Drive channel. If you like this narrated format, subscribe to OLED Drive, click like, and hit the bell so you get notified when new videos are posted. Leave a comment and tell us what worked, what you want to see more of, and whether this mechanical narrator should return for another route or be gently escorted back to silence. The drive ends here on the Jacques-Cartier bridge. Thanks for watching.